What if 2020 isn't the bad year but it's the start of a bad decade? My life fades. The vision dims. All that remains are memories. I remember a time of chaos, ruined dreams, this wasted land. But most of all, I remember the road warrior, the man we called Max. To understand who he was we have to go back to the other time, when the world was powered by the black fuel and the desert sprouted great cities of pipe and steel gone now, swept away. For reasons long forgotten, two mighty warrior tribes went to war and touched off a blaze which engulfed them all. Without fuel they were nothing. They'd built a house of straw. The thundering machines sputtered and stopped. Their leaders talked and talked and talked, but nothing could stem the avalanche. Their world crumbled. Cities exploded, a whirlwind of looting, a firestorm of fear. Men began to feed on men. On the roads it was a white-line nightmare. Only those mobile enough to scavenge, brutal enough to pillage would survive. The gangs took over the highways, ready to wage war for a tank of juice, and in this maelstrom of decay ordinary men were battered and smashed, men like Max, the warrior Max. In the roar of an engine, he lost everything and became a shell of a man, a burnt-out desolate man, a man haunted by the demons of his past, a man who wandered out into the wasteland. And it was here, in this blighted place, that he learned to live again. I mean, in truth 2020 isn't that bad of a year. Yeah, it sucked in comparison to the last decade or so, but we've had worse stretches. The Great Depression made this seem like a cakewalk. 2001 was a pretty rough year, if you'll recall. And 2002 wasn't a whole lot better. There was a housing collapse in the mid-late 00s. I remember, because my mom actually lost her house during that time and I was still a kid living with her. We've had pandemics before, we'll have them again. Life ain't that bad yet. Buyout, you raise a good question. What if this is only the beginning? Biden appears to be on track to win the election. What happens if somehow Trump subverts the will of the people? Becomes a full-on dictator? Or what if Biden gets to take office but the economy continues to spiral downward anyway? What if COVID is just the first in a long line of new viruses that just get worse and worse? What if a year from now a bunch of lunatics are walking up and down our streets with a meat wagon, ringing a bell, and shouting, "Bring out your dead"? What if our relationship with North Korea deteriorates under a Biden administration and Kim Jong-un nukes Blacksburg, South Carolina? What if Jason Voorhees is real and he takes Manhattan? What if 3 years from now the American dollar is worth 0.000001 cent and bread is $16 a loaf? What if a comet the size of the one that killed the dinosaurs is just behind Saturn and on its way here right now? Lordy, I need a Xanax. Thanks for stressing me out. I hate to break it to you, but there really is no if here. Keep an eye on the million-acre megafires and back-to-back hurricanes, the unprecedented absence of sea ice, the melting permafrost and massive methane leaks, not to mention ancient pathogens with the potential to cause new pandemics. Once it really sinks in that this is not only the new normal, but will continue to get worse, a whole lot of valuable property will become effectively uninsurable/unsellable. Millions, if not tens of millions, of people will go bankrupt and relocate in a relatively brief time span. This will add pressure in safer, for a while, areas to already nearly exhausted topsoil and groundwater, to say nothing of decaying infrastructure, in the US at least. Mileage may vary in developed countries. Between this and the continuing/worsening crop losses due to erratic flooding, intense winds, looking at you on both in 2 years, Iowa, etc., will very likely lead to food shortages. Homelessness will skyrocket. This will cause massive social upheaval and likely cause banks to fail. We're in that moment at the high point of the track on a roller coaster where you first feel your ass lifting out of the seat as you start downward. Make sure your seat belt is fastened. Seriously though, buy a gun, set up a vehicle you can live in if you have to evacuate, and dig up a lawn to grow some food. Shit's about to get interesting. I mean, that's pretty much guaranteed at this point. Climate change is just going to get more and more destructive. The COVID pandemic isn't going anywhere anytime soon. There is a new bird flu that is apparently becoming difficult to contain as well. The best years are behind us. The scale of change that needs to happen to prevent climate destruction is utterly impossible in the current geopolitical climate. There is no cooperation. Aside from that, economic destabilization has been intensifying from COVID and climate change as well. Wildfires, floods, and droughts are and will continue to fuck up the world's food supply. We've had our golden years and pissed them away not making enough change to fix our future. Like shit man, growing up in the 80s and 90s I was swept up into environmentalism. Nobody listened except other activists. I remember talking to Governor Tom Ridge when the Environmental Club got a time slot with him. We begged him to create regulation to limit fracking and to actually make recycling easy for people. Guess what? He didn't do shit about fracking, and in fact over the next 10 years it got so bad here that you can literally go to creeks and light the water on fire. We had a huge fish die off back in the early 00s from it. TLDR, we are so fucked moving forward if we can't come together and tackle climate change. I got really depressed and anxious reading this post's comments, but the few optimistic comments, like yours, helped a bit. It is the first time I see Reddit's bad/negative side and I am shocked. I know things are bad and we can't be ignorant/oblivious to what's happening, but fear-mongering and doomsday prophecies won't help either. We are living in strange times, but only because we never experienced something like this before. If we survived through a separate war or pandemic in our lifetime before this one, we probably won't be as panicky as we are. New things/experiences are scary. Look at all the shit that happened the last 120 years, and I can almost certainly say there were people in those times that though it was the end and it's only downhill from there. No good times in sight, but yet, here we are. There were good times, weren't there? Humans are shitty, yes. We need to change our ways, I agree. But we always pulled through, not without getting kicked on the ass and beaten up. Needless to say, we are tough. Look at how much bullshit our ancestors survived. They didn't have the technology or knowledge we do today. My point is, things are bad now and no one can certainly say what the future holds, but don't spend every day so negatively and focusing on all that can go wrong, because it won't do you any good. There must be bad times so we can enjoy the good times when they come and learn to appreciate what we had/have. The 3% will be enough to vaccinate all key workers/health workers/vulnerable, care homes etc., and then to target super spreader events. A targeted vaccination like that can achieve far more than you'd expect from the percent of the population. Some countries like the US, EU, Brazil, Mexico etc. have separate bilateral agreements to target all or nearly all their population early. There are 5 oral vaccines, one of them, Vaxart, in phase 1 trials already. These would be as easy to take as any tablet and would make vaccinating the world much easier. They also are far easier to make. The most recent news was that the Oxford vaccine triggers a strong immune response in both elderly people and the very young, and they also don't get bad adverse reactions in them either. That's all very good if it works as a vaccine. Still don't know if the immune response protects you. That is what the phase 3 trial will show. The new thing is they have shown that their vaccine generates a good immune response in elderly people older than 55, and that it also has low reactivity. They don't have bad adverse reactions to the vaccine itself. They don't say what their source is for this data, but will publish it soon. They don't yet know that the vaccine works because they don't know if the immune response protects you. That's what the phase 3 trials are for. Usually an immune response does protect you, but AIDS is an example of a virus that triggers an immune response that doesn't protect you. Coronaviruses are not as bad as AIDS, but they do have some of the glycan coverings that can make an immune response less effective, so they have to deal with that. The pandemic response has led to much more investment in health systems. One simple example, we are rebuilding with many countries now having the ability to make their own medical oxygen, and as a result some of the 800,000 children under 5 who die of pneumonia every year will be saved in the future after the pandemic is over. Hundreds of thousands of children worldwide currently die every year of pneumonia because only the rich countries could afford the medical oxygen needed to treat them. Now the poorer countries can make their own medical oxygen in local power plants. In remote places they are solar powered. We could have worked together to solve that years ago, but this pandemic has brought us together in ways we never have been before. There was a lot of that sort of thing already happening, more than you realize, but with the pandemic countries have cooperated in extraordinary ways. The Great Reset is to do with continuing that cooperation into the future as we rebuild our global economies again. A world with healthier children and less deaths from childhood mortality is a world where parents are more confident and feel safer bringing young lives into the world, where they have smaller families, population levels out sooner. It's the same with eliminating COVID-19. There are several other diseases we can eradicate from the world after COVID-19 using the structures and organization we have in place. The need for oxygen just in the low and middle income countries is 1.2 million cylinders each day, which is 13 times higher than in June. But the WHO have made it possible for countries to make their own oxygen to produce the vast amounts needed to support their patients. Giving oxygen quickly and early on is one of the main things that helps save lives from COVID-19. I don't know jack squat, but it seems people are forgetting the long-term effects of climate change. Call me a tree hugger, but that's not a trend if all the science says we're fucked in the near future. 9 billion. 2050. I hear this all the time. How are we going to expect this to bear to fruition if global circumstances don't allow for this to happen safely? We can't twiddle our thumbs for our government to combat our socio-economic issues, international affairs, and environmental issues. Each level of society affects how the planet bounces back from our punches. We can't freeze glaciers back. Higher ocean levels means coastal cities go further underwater and by 2050 might even lose whole areas. Ocean life is a lot more important to us than we think. It's also the most affected by climate change. Every year the temperature goes up. Bugs. People hate bugs. But it's going to get increasingly worse when harmful vectors like mosquitoes don't get frozen out by the winter and last throughout the year. This causes an imbalance in several levels in the ecosystem. If you live in seasons, not only will you be dealing with snow sludge, you got biters who are still able to direct inject the next line of epidemic into your blood. Don't even get me started on potential future sicknesses or the rise of antimicrobial resistance. Loss of ecological systems from large animals to annoying insects and microbes means our loss too. Overfishing, overhunting, mismanaging land, all of it becomes issues we will need to overcome as the procrastinators we are. But unlike a paper assignment, we won't have time and resources to punch out a paper. We would need some unicorn council intervention to save our hides. We want to blame corporations, but we do have a part in all of this too. You don't need to buy convenience items all the time. Having a car is a necessity at times, but we can carpool and also invest in practices that mean lower exhaust and lower waste, which result in lower junkyard contribution. Think twice before throwing things away. Karenism is a terrible act on our own people, but who says you can't deploy it on company CEOs or oil empires? Industries are terrified of the angry consumer, and as much as I cringe seeing the next tweet on uninformed ways to act, let's do seemingly harmful action. If people come together informed and loud, companies will move. Our government too. We are a generation with a lot on our shoulders. It sucks. Everything hurts. But we need to stop pitying ourselves and do something, not only for the generations to come if we can even survive what will happen, but for ourselves. Because I'm not happy living in 100 degrees Fahrenheit for longer than summertime, and so do a bunch of people who blast their air conditioning 24/8 when it's unnecessary. Edit, For the record, I am saying 2020 is the start of a domino effect in agreement to the post's question. If we don't demand radical change into the Jetsons now, it would go to say that I wouldn't even want to live on this planet in the next few years. We face a lot of crap factors, but we need to go into the future with our emotions in check, and making sure we dot our I's and cross our T's. Edit number 2, sorry, I had to add the 9 billion part and then fix it. It's not. It's not at all, and the pending US election won't make it or break it. I'm not irreverent for those who have passed from COVID-19 or been affected by the fires in Australia and the western US, as well as many other tragedies around the world. But there are 64 days left in 2020, and anyone still alive right now needs to be saying, this is my year. This is the year it starts. Starts what? I don't know, whatever it is for you. Thinking about going back to school? Now's the time to apply. Wanting to lose that 20 pounds or 200 pounds? Start walking every day. Short distances in the beginning are more than fine. I started walking to the stop sign and back. It's not far, but it's a start. Want to start a business? Spend an hour every night researching what you want to do. That's 64 hours left this year, and that's a lot of research time. Thinking you need to be better about staying in touch with friends and family. No time like the right this second to send a text or email saying you've been thinking about them. Call them tonight. Whatever it is you've been thinking about, just get on it. No matter how old you are, this next decade is going to be your best. Am I late to this thread? Maybe I'm not. Maybe the people that need to read this most will still read it. If 2020 is just the beginning of a so-called bad decade, so be it. I have had rough decades before. I will probably have a rough decade again. I will not be subdued. I will not be brought low. I have been through worse and I have survived. I don't need much to be happy. I have people in my life that I love and who love me. I have a roof over my head and a bed to sleep in, and even if I didn't, I have survived that before too. The things I treasure most in this life cannot be taken away from me by even the worst circumstances. As long as I have air to breathe, water to drink, and food to eat, I will endure. We will endure. You are so much stronger than you give yourself credit for. 2020 is nothing compared to previous bad years. There have been some seriously bad years throughout history. Losing my main source of income and having to stay home will not break me. I am fortunate to still have a home, and I will never lose sight of how grateful I am for that. There is a quote, a conversation between Frodo and Gandalf, that I feel is appropriate at these times. Frodo, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. Gandalf, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. User Avatar. Level 1. Isterma. 10M. I'll be downvoted to hell, but Corona isn't going away anytime soon. We had a window to completely eliminate it, but the self-centered cock goblins of the world ruined it for us. Even if a vaccine were developed today, there's billions of people on the earth to vaccinate. That will take years, not days or weeks. Even then, some things are irreparably changed. I know I won't be comfortable not wearing a mask for years, maybe longer. I have asthma and other comorbidities that mean I'll likely not survive getting COVID. I won't risk it until there's a treatment. There's millions that are similarly affected. Even so, people who previously worked in an office that have transitioned to working from home are realizing they don't have to drive 2 to 3 hours each way every day to go to work. Some employees might want to go back, but there will be a chunk of people who won't want to. People will move away from larger city centers to places with lower costs of living, where their wages will go further. People will eat out less often, and movie theaters will finally go the way of the dinosaur, except for special occasions. This decade will be hard, but it has a chance to be transformative for good. I mean, it is the start of a really bad decade. Wealth inequality is at an all-time high, the climate is changing so severely and so rapidly that our children will likely live in a world that's completely indistinguishable to the one we grew up in. Fascism and extremism, both politically and religiously, is on the rise across the world, and we no one to blame for all these problems but ourselves. Things aren't going to magically get better next year. As an American, they will get worse. Either we'll have 4 more years of Trump or 4 to 12 years of Biden and or Harris, then 4 to 8 years of Trump 2.0 before we can try to fix the shit we got ourselves into during this past Democrat primary. We're fucked. And thanks to climate change, we're probably taking the rest of the world down with us. Edit. Also, man oh man is this thread full of younger folks who see the writing on the wall. Hopefully they have the courage and strength to do what is going to need to be done to deal with the problems that their parents and grandparents are trying to force them to deal with.